Grey, a very pleasant day in western Scotland once more. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place for the thunderstorms. Not everywhere in this area will catch a downpour, but where they do occur, they could cause some problems, potential for flooding, certainly a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. And we're not done with the thunderstorms because on Saturday across the south, we could again see some very heavy downpours developing. Once more, a fine day in western Scotland.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Major problems on the M90 this evening. The motorway is blocked southbound from the Broxton roundabout down to the Craig End exit. An investigation since 4:30 is well underway to the south of Perth, leaving lengthy queues on the approach. Heading out of Manchester on the M602, the motorway is down to a single lane. A lorry's broken down just off the Eccles interchange where it meets the M60, causing long queues back into the city centre onto the A57, the Regent Road. There are long queues on the M1 northbound towards and past the Chesterfield exit, junction 29 if you're heading through Derbyshire after a police investigation closed the motorway for quite some time. And the M54 is blocked eastbound off the M6 following an accident and spillage. And finally in Kent, the Medway Tunnel is shut eastbound. Recovery works underway northwest of Gillingham following a shed load. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You command. Good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good evening to you and welcome to Farage. But I'm not Nigel Farage, I'm Martin Dorby, standing in for the big man tonight. Coming up on tonight's show, a new study has revealed that the British public significantly underestimate the role asylum seekers have to play in overall immigration figures. So, is illegal immigration nothing to worry about? Next up, the Dutch government have asked to opt out of the EU's asylum rules. Good luck with that. Well, how will this clash between the Netherlands and Brussels play out? And what will the consequences be? And the Labour Party are reportedly considering scrapping the 35 hours that job seekers rule. Should they go ahead with this recommendation, or is it just another example of Labour's soft-touch approach to welfare? All of that and much more after your latest news headlines, and here's Mark White.
At 7 o'clock, the main headlines from the GB News Centre. Sir Keir Starmer has insisted he is completely in control amid a row within government over his top advisor's pay. The revelation that Sue Gray, the Downing Street Chief of Staff, received a pay rise after the election and now earns more than Sir Keir has prompted a furious backlash. Speaking ahead of the Labour Party conference this weekend, the Prime Minister insisted his team was focused on the government's mandate to deliver change. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has urged British nationals to leave Lebanon, warning the situation could worsen rapidly. It comes as leader of the Hezbollah terrorist group said the waves of explosions targeting his members over the last 2 days were equal to a declaration of war. Hassan Nasrallah said Israel had crossed all red lines in launching the attacks, which targeted thousands of communications devices used by the group, killing dozens and wounding more than 3,000. Well, these are live images of the Lebanese capital, Beirut, tonight. Aircraft have been heard overhead over Beirut throughout the day, sonic booms, while the leader of the Hezbollah terror group has been addressing his followers. Well, the Israeli government hasn't commented on the coordinated attacks, but has said it's entered a new phase in its almost year-long war. Hassan Nasrallah said there would be a just punishment in response, but gave no indication of what that would be. Parts of Dublin were brought to a standstill this evening as anti-immigration demonstrators and anti-racism activists staged rival events in the city. The protests following mounting tensions in the Irish Republic over the growing number of asylum seekers in the country and a spate of recent incidents linked to the immigrants. GB News cameras witnessed a small number of arrests. GB News has been told that a significant number of women have contacted the Harrods Survivors Helpline since new allegations of sexual assault and rape came to light. 5 women have claimed they were raped by the former Harrods owner, Mohammed Al-Fayed, when they worked at the luxury London department store. The BBC reported that more than 20 female ex-employees said the billionaire, who died last year, sexually assaulted them and raped some. It's claimed that during Fayed's ownership, Harrods not only failed to intervene, but helped cover up abuse allegations. Harrods' current owners said they were utterly appalled by the allegations and apologised to the victims who'd been failed. A professional footballer has been charged in connection with an attempt to smuggle £600,000 worth of cannabis through Stansted Airport. J. Emmanuel Thomas, who's currently a striker for Scottish Championship side Greenock Morton, was arrested by National Crime Agency officers in the days after his flight. The former Livingston, Aberdeen and Arsenal Academy player has also played for Ipswich Town, Bristol City and Queen's Park Rangers. Finally, the Prince of Wales has been visiting Scotland to thank workers in the homelessness sector for supporting the city's rough sleepers. He also announced that those workers are now eligible for the Blue Light Card, a discount scheme for those in the emergency services, the NHS and the armed forces. And those are your main headlines. You're right up to date. Back to Martin. Got an early look at him there.
Thank you very much, Margot. I hope you enjoyed that quick early look. We're having a good chat in the studio about this topic because a new study has revealed that the public significantly overestimates how much UK immigration is made up of asylum seekers. On average, people think that asylum seekers account for around about 37% of total immigration, when in fact it's closer to just 7%. And asylum seekers and illegal immigration, of course, is a hugely important topic. But don't forget, 1.2 million people entered the country legally in the past year, putting a huge strain on housing and public services. So do these figures suggest that the public is being bamboozled about the scale of legal migration as the pressure builds on the government to manage migration effectively? This research highlights the need for a clearer understanding of who is coming into the UK and why. Well, to discuss this, I'm now joined by a magnificent panel this evening, and that is my panel of Dame Andrea Jenkins, the former Conservative MP and Minister, and of course the human rights campaigner and activist Peter Tatchell. Welcome to you both. Let's start off with you, if we could, Dame Andrea. And I don't know about you, but when I hear this thing about nothing to see here, it's only 7%, it's 7% of a flipping great big number. Absolutely. People still have the right to be annoyed, though. They're always concerned about the numbers and the types of people coming into our country. Dame Andrea.
I mean, as a former MP, it was the biggest thing in my box illegal migration and the whole migration figures. I mean, one good thing that the Conservatives did, they limited the amount that students could bring their loved ones, etc. And I think we've started seeing those figures come through now. But 7%, like you said, it's a crazy amount. And when people can't get the children in the schools that they want, they can't get a doctor's appointment, a dentist's appointment, and we're still finding people waiting 4 or 5 years to get onto a housing list. So I think people's quite rightly had enough.
Peter Tatchell, do you think these kind of studies they're meant to try and downplay the issue? People think it's a third. It's actually only 7%. What's your takeaway from that? Is that because you think the media obsesses with asylum seekers too much and whips it up?
I think there's certainly some sections of the media and some right-wing politicians who are using the asylum issue as a political weapon. They're weaponising people who, in most cases, have a genuine fear of persecution and are fleeing conflict and war. Well,
is that true?
Yes,
it's mainly
because
blokes, isn't it? With iPhones.
most people who seek asylum do eventually get it because the Home Office adjudicators look at their case in forensic detail and do assess that they have a legitimate fear of persecution. The other thing to point out is that...
They come from France, Peter, most of them. France isn't a country where they're being persecuted.
Yes, but they come ultimately from Syria.
And they suddenly turn Christian, don't they? As we've seen recently.
There are a small number of people who are gaming the system, and that's wrong, totally. But many of them are genuine, and they also have assets that are good for our country. So my foundation, the Peter Tatchell Foundation, a human rights body, we have helped lots of people secure asylum. We've only ever had, in the hundreds and hundreds, people, one person who we had doubts about, and we did not proceed with that. On top of that, many of these people have skills we need. Doctors, dentists, nurses, plumbers, carpenters.
Peter, we hear that all the time. You are not telling me nuclear physicists are swarming over the channel.
No, not nuclear physicists. No, that's true. But we do underestimate the economic benefit that genuine legal asylum seekers who get their cases assessed and are approved, we underestimate the contribution they make to the country. I'll just give one example. After the Iraq War, I helped an Iraqi doctor get asylum in this country. His payback, he could have gone into Guy's or St Thomas's Hospital, got a top job. He was a very highly qualified person. But he chose to go to a remote Scottish community where they had no GP. And he stayed there for 5 years to show his appreciation to Britain, to giving him a place of safety. That was of huge benefit to that Scottish community.
But meanwhile, in the real world, the vast majority of asylum seekers coming here illegally at any rate are low-skilled. And in fact, data came out last week, Amanda, that each one of them costs £250,000 net by the time their pension age goes to £1 million each if they live to 100, and £750,000 if they live to 75. So I'm sure your Iraqi doctor, mate, was a superb contribution to the UK. But is that actually the majority?
No, of course it's not. And what I'd like to ask Peter is, what about, you talk about human rights, what about the rights of the British people? You know, they are struggling to pay their bills. I had so many constituents, especially, you know, still writing to me as an ex-MP about pensioners' fuel allowance being lost, not being able to get children into the schools, and they're struggling. They can't get a doctor's appointment. What about the rights of the British people?
I agree there are problems, and I empathise with people who are struggling, but to blame asylum applicants is just monstrous. It's not true. Well, you know, these problems existed.
But isn't it a question of numbers? More people come into the country, so we're, you know, at its on our knees anyway. So there's less school places, less doctors' places. So it's not a blame game. This is numbers.
This deficiency of doctors and schools has existed for years, even decades, because of underinvestment by successive Labour and Conservative governments. To blame refugees and migrants for the problem is just completely out of proportion. We have 171 billionaires in this country. They could easily afford to pay a 1% wealth tax. It's nothing to them.
They already pay the most tax.
But they're also leaving under Labour, aren't they?
Hang on. They could afford to pay a 1% or 2% wealth tax, and that would raise at least $6 billion every year on a recurring basis. Now, they wouldn't actually lose anything because their net wealth is increasing by 5 to 10% every year anyway. So it's really easy to make those with the broader shoulders pay a little bit more. If they're true patriots, if they really believe in Britain, if they love this country,
what if they're not
they will make.
What if they're not British? What if they're billionaires from Hong Kong or America or Switzerland?
Well, if they're living here,
clear off.
If they're here, then they have a duty and obligation to pay their fair share. And the number of millionaires leaving is, I think, 9,000 out of 2.5 million.
It's 9,000 too many.
It's peanuts.
Back to your numbers, it costs £8 billion per annum in unemployment benefits for those who were born abroad.
Yeah,
so you're talking about the numbers. The numbers are we spend 6 times as much on unemployed immigrants as we just axed on the winter fuel allowance for pensioners who paid in all their life. Those are the numbers, and that isn't right, surely.
I agree that the pensioners should not be targeted. That's absolutely wrong.
Well, they have been.
Britain's pensions are some of the lowest in Europe. It's an absolute disgrace. Once again, successive Labour and Conservative governments have allowed Britain's senior citizens to be at the bottom rank of pensions in Europe. Switzerland has, I think, £44,000 a year for a pensioner couple. It's pathetic when our pensioner couples are getting half that. We're the 6th richest country in the world. We can afford to pay more, and we should pay more. And those with the broader shoulders, to quote Spider-Man, or paraphrase Spider-Man, with great wealth comes great responsibility.
OK, well, my spider sense is tingling. We're getting on.
I agree with you 100% on that point.
Good. Let's move on to an affiliated topic, because immigration is not just a hot-button issue here in the mainland, because today in Ireland, thousands of protesters have been gathering in Dublin. Protesters have been calling on the government to crack down on migration and for citizens to take back the streets. That was going on for several hours in Dublin. Ireland is full, they were crying, and a small counter-protest is also taking place in the city with so-called anti-racist protests chanting "Refugees are welcome."
Refugees are welcome here. Refugees are welcome here. Refugees are welcome here.
They should make a note of all their addresses and see if refugees really are welcome there. Now, throughout the day, there have also been loud but non-violent confrontations between the two opposing groups of protesters. And joining me now, who's been covering this all day for us since 1 p.m. with the latest, is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, you've been on the front line of this protest all day, started very, very well-natured, and then we saw a line of Gardaí forming up, kettling them down the streets. For those who didn't see the show earlier, can you explain to viewers what made those protesters take to the streets of Dublin today?
Well, yes, Martin, I've just listened to your former guest, and I thought to myself how similar the problem is here in the Republic of Ireland. Now, the Republic of Ireland has seen a massive increase in undocumented immigrants coming in to the island, and the people here are very, very worried, number one, about their safety with undocumented young men coming in, but they're also realists. They are sitting saying, hold on, we haven't got the infrastructure for this. Ireland is a beautiful country, it's a modern European country, but it only has a population of just over 5 million in the south and 2 million in the north. And over the last years, the taxation that they have paid has done very well for them to look after the community that is here. But with this sudden growth in immigration coming in, and most of them being undocumented, it has created real problems inside the whole island of Ireland, north and south. And in fact, in the south, you are seeing many, many small villages and communities having larger numbers of immigrants in them than they do of Irish people. And I've covered this for a couple of years, as you know, and I was told, first of all, this was a working class problem. It was only those that were on the dole that was concerned about it. And of course, that's not true. And in fact, today, I just turned around and looked around me and saw so many middle-class people, grandmothers, mothers with pushchairs, working-class men, businessmen. And what they did here, they formed up at 1 o'clock, and by 2 o'clock they marched to the Dáil, the Houses of Parliament in the Republic of Ireland. And they went there to let those that represent them in the Dáil to know that they are unhappy with their decisions. Now, today was the first day that the Dáil has sat since the summer recess, and not one of them came out to hear their concerns. In fact, they were barricaded halfway down the street. So they then decided to march back across the River Liffey, and at the bottom of O'Connell Street is a major bridge where they all decided to sit down and block the road. Now, what really made things worse was, of course, that just coming up to 5 o'clock, the Garda Síochána, the police force here in the Republic of Ireland, decided to push these people up the street, and most of these people are voters, and they pushed them up the street, making multiple arrests on the way up the street. In fact, one of them, if you were listening earlier, was threatening to arrest me if I didn't move on. So this is creating real problems in amongst the society here that are from all walks of life and are really quite frustrated at how they're not being listened to and how hard their lives are outside Parliament. And they're saying, we put yous in, yous are meant to represent us, you're meant to spend our tax money in the right way, and we are feeling the pinch outside. Our taxation is going up, and there's due to be a budget here next week or the week after. It will be one of the biggest giveaway budgets that we have seen, and because they will call a general election by the 15th of November, because this government is in basically the same cycle as the United Kingdom government, and there will have to be a coalition government put in place. So the scenes that we've seen today of the political classes not seeming to listen to those, not even in working classes, but in middle classes, will tell in those elections. And don't forget, the Republic of Ireland 9 times out of 10 has a coalition government, and that means that even the smallest parties that could get in may have power in that case. So real frustration here in Dublin today, and real frustration that they are not being listened to.
Dougie Beattie, fearless reporting as ever. I'm very proud to say that GB News was the only media outlet at that protest today. Nobody else can be bothered to turn up. Dougie Beattie, thank you very much for putting in the hard yards there. And let's have a quick chat back with my panel. Dame Andrea Jenkins and, of course, Peter Tatchell. Let's start with you, if we could. Dame Andrea, you were nodding quite vociferously there about the fact that the political class couldn't even be bothered to go out and engage with the voters.
I think your reporter hit the nail on the head, actually, Martin, when he said that they're not listening. And I think this is a problem, you know, here in the UK as well. People feel politicians are not listening. Naturally, we're charitable. But when you pay your taxes and you feel that you're at the back of the queue, enough is enough. And I think clearly that's what's happening in Dublin as well.
Peter Tatchell, those protesters today in Dublin, they weren't far right, they weren't knuckle draggers, they weren't racist, they're concerned citizens, and they're not being listened to. That is where the problems start.
Well, if I was a member of the Irish Parliament, I would have gone out to meet them, I would have listened to their concerns, and I would have tried to address them. But I would have said to people that the fact that we have these refugees and the numbers are substantial, that is not the core of the problem. The core of the problem is the unequal distribution of wealth. Ireland has plenty of money to provide good quality housing and schools for all its people, including refugees and their families.
But they just took
the trouble is...
But they just took 14 billion euros off of Apple, and we learned today that money won't go to housing for local people. It's got to be hoovered up addressing this problem. Peter, Andrea, we have to leave it there for now, but of course we've got plenty more to come after the break, including this. It's going to be a corker. The Dutch government has formally asked the European Union to opt out of their migration policy. Well, good luck with that. And how will the latest row over asylum in Europe play out? That's next. This is Farage with me, Martin Daubney, only on GB News.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
I'm now joined by a truly inspirational man. He's an endurance runner, Ben Smith, 401 marathons in just 401 days for mental health and well-being. He was spurned on after being bullied as a child, was able to raise a whopping £250,000. I'm pleased to say that he joins me now. Right, so this was a while ago, wasn't it?
Yes.
How long ago was it?
Well, we're coming up to, I think next year, roughly about 10 years since we started it. In 2026 will be 10 years since we finished.
So when did you run the marathons?
So it was between 2015 and 2016, over the course of 401 days, all around the UK.
What kind of madness was that?
Oh, it was an adventure, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, on day one when we started in Bristol, never ever thought that the project would ever become what it became. But over the course of the 401 days, we ran with 13,500 people within 8 miles of everywhere on the British mainland, from Land's End to John O'Groats. So,
and that was the journey from Land's End, John O'Groats?
Yeah. We covered so many different communities around the UK because I suppose the reason why I was doing it was to raise so much money for 2 anti-bullying charities that we wanted to include people in that. And yeah, I got to run in some amazing places.
I bet you did. What would you say is a beautiful place? I mean, the whole country, I love this country, but there are some outstanding, beautiful areas around. What would you say?
Oh, definitely.
Where's the best place that you run?
Well, I think I've got a few, but I think I would say probably the Highlands of Scotland.
I knew you were going to say somewhere like that.
Yeah, just the kind of vastness of it, the dramaticness of it. I remember running up and down one of the paths in the Highlands near Glencoe and coming face to face with a wild stag. So it was quite scary.
What did it do?
Oh, it did nothing. It did absolutely nothing. It was quite used to people because of the path.
What are you doing here? This is my house.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for the big man. Now, it seems that all over Europe, immigration is rising up the political agenda. Earlier this month, we saw Germany close its land borders, all of them, in a bid to stop flows of illegal migration, following a spate of stabbings carried out by illegal migrants and also Islamist terror attacks. And now the Netherlands is also cracking down on illegal migration. The Netherlands Asylum and Migration Minister said that the country has to be in charge of our own asylum policy once more. Strong words, but will they fall on deaf ears? Because this comes after the right-wing coalition government announced plans for the country's strictest ever asylum regime. Now, the move is likely to agitate fellow EU members after all 27 member states agreed to a new EU migration and asylum pact last December, which means, of course, they're all going to take their fair share. Well, joining me live from The Hague to discuss this is Thierry Baudet, who's the leader of the Forum for Democracy and a member of the House of Representatives. Welcome to the show, Thierry. Always a pleasure. So sounds great. Tough words. I've been an MEP, I've been into Brussels, I've been to Strasbourg. They won't listen. What happens next?
That's true. That's absolutely true. So the debate in Parliament over the last couple days has been centered about two things. The first is, does this strict immigration policy that's been proposed work within the national legal framework? And I think ultimately we're going to be able to push this through, and it's a great idea. But then again, the next question is, how is the EU going to respond? And that's where Geert Wilders and I are separating paths, because I'm convinced that only if we leave the European Union, we will actually be able to control our borders again. And that's also why I've been supporting Nigel Farage from the very beginning. I've been a Brexiteer from the very start. And Geert Wilders is saying, no, we're going to negotiate this from within the European Union. As much as I like the, optimism of it, I think it's just doomed to fail.
Well, Thierry, I do like the spirit of Brexit catching on. Nexit, that's got a nice ring to it. I should, however, warn you that leaving the European Union doesn't necessarily mean you can take back control of your borders anyway. But next, let's turn then to Germany. They're still in the European Union. They're still in the European Court of Human Rights, but they've just said enough is enough. They've closed all of their borders, 2,500 miles, including with your country, Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Switzerland, Austria, Czech Republic and Poland. Going to turn everybody back, and they've just decided to go alone. They're even sending Afghans back to the Taliban. Why can't you do the same?
Well, there's a very significant distinction, of course, between controlling your borders and closing them. It's true that we've been able to control our borders also during lockdowns, during COVID. But the point of the matter is that the free movement of people is the fundamental value, if you can call it that, of the European project. The whole idea of the European project is that we are not going to be able to be sovereign nations anymore, that we're going to be blended into this European soup, this European entity. And that's why the free movement of peoples has been the foundational principle of the entire project from its very start in 1957. So there is it's very, very difficult to conceive bureaucrats accepting the fundamental idea behind the whole project, which was to undermine nations, to be accepted as a prerogative of member states.
And Thierry, can I get a quick flavour from you? We hear a lot about the soaring crime. In Denmark, for example, they record crime by nationality, and that's been a real eye-opener. Of course, they wouldn't allow us to do that in Britain. We've seen Islamist terror on the rise in Germany. What's the state of play in terms of immigration and crime and the social reaction to all of that in the Netherlands right now?
Well, we haven't got the kind of riots that you've been enduring and suffering from in the UK, but surely it's the same idea. I mean, we've been receiving low IQ, high testosterone immigration from Africa and the Middle East for the couple of decades in the entirety of the EU and of Europe. And that's going to play out in some destructive way. Either it's going to be massive reliance on social welfare, or it's going to be massive aggression or crime or anything in between. But these are just simply people that are not going to contribute to the great flourishing of our continent. So we've got to stop immigration, and we've got to start accelerating remigration, because already now in a significant number of cities in Europe, Europeans are not in the majority anymore. They don't feel at home anymore, and we've got to reverse this trend.
OK, Thierry Baudet, that's the leader of the Forum for Democracy and a member of the House of Representatives there in the Netherlands. Channel your inner Nigel Farage. Go head-to-head with the European Union, and the best of luck with the spirit of Nexit. Now, let's come back to the studio now to discuss this with my panel. Of course, Dame Andrea Jenkins, former Conservative MP and Minister, and, of course, the human rights campaigner and activist Peter Tatchell. Shall I start with you this time, Peter? A lot of countries across the European Union are starting to get a taste of Brexit, wanting to go it alone, because whether you like it or not, whether people like it or not, we are seeing a change, a social change. A lot of countries are saying the same. Geert Wilders, his party, are getting voted in. The AfD are getting voted in Germany. Le Pen in France. The continent seems to be going more right-wing, not in isolation, but in a reaction to open borders. What's your take?
Well, these parties who are anti-immigrant are still a clear minority, but they are gaining ground. We have to be concerned about that. We have to be concerned that by making a big issue of refugees, they are fueling extremism, they are fueling hatred, discrimination, and even violence. There have been lots of attacks upon immigrants, some asylum seekers, but others working here and contributing to our economy. We should never generalise. You know, if we look at loyalty, what was really interesting was a poll a couple of years ago which showed that British Muslims have a higher loyalty to this country than the average British person. That shows that, you know, integration and a commitment to this country is not based upon being born here, that people who come here and make their homes here, perhaps not just recently, but first, second and third generations, have a real commitment to this country. Well, and we should be encouraging that and supporting that.
You paint a pretty picture, but meanwhile, this has been driven in countries like the Netherlands, certainly in Germany, by an explosion of violent crime amongst the immigrant
It's like a ghetto, isn't it, in parts of Germany?
And in Denmark, when they publish the crime by nationality, there's a clear picture which contradicts what you're saying. But what's your take on this?
I mean, I think it's great what the Dutch are doing. I mean, clearly Germany has got more of a pull because they contribute more financially to the EU, so they will close their borders. But I think it's going the right way. I think people across Europe, in the UK as well, they're sick of this globalist agenda. And I think we're seeing more of a return to the nation state and people actually looking after their own, especially post-COVID when people have been struggling.
I'd like to see us focus more on what's the reasons why people migrate or seek asylum. It's mostly because of poverty and war. If we can deal with those problems in the countries they flee from, then the pull to this country, the numbers will fall, because most people do not want to leave their families and loved ones.
But
they don't want to leave the culture they've grown up in.
They want to stay. An ever-increasing number, so they clearly do.
Because so many of them are suffering from extreme poverty and war and conflict and sectarian violence. So let's get a global commitment to help solve those problems, and that would, I wouldn't say it would eliminate, but it would reduce migration and immigration.
Peter Thatcher, we can't even solve the problems in our own country, let alone the entire world. But thank you very much, Peter. Andrea, let's move on. Coming up after the break, should the Labour government change the rules when it comes to job seekers' allowance? Because one independent think tank thinks so. They say the current policy is bad for work-shy Britain. We'll debate that next. This is Farage with me, Martin Daubney, only on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Good evening to you. Tomorrow, likely to start fairly grey. It should brighten up with some sunshine, but a change in the south. We are expecting to see some heavy and thundery showers developing as the day goes on. Low pressure is just pushing northwards, getting rid of the high pressure that's brought most of us a dry week. With the easterly winds, the cloud is feeding back in through the night across northern England, across the Midlands, into East Wales and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, generally staying dry and clear here, and that's where we'll see the lowest temperatures well down into single figures. But elsewhere, staying quite mild, actually, with the blanket of cloud. That cloud thick enough for a bit of drizzle on some eastern coasts and over the Pennines. We may see one or two showers in the morning across the southeast, but we're more likely to see them develop as we go through the day. It will be quite a cloudy start, but as those skies start to brighten, some heavier showers developing later on. Much of western Wales, Northern Ireland and western Scotland having a sparkling start to the day with plenty of sunshine. That will soon start to lift the temperatures, but the east coast plagued by that har, and that could be a feature of the weather throughout the day. And at times that cloud thick enough for a bit of drizzle. As I mentioned, though, it's in the south where we're a bit concerned about the showers that are likely to develop. It will brighten up. We'll see some sunshine, but that will spark a scattering of showers, perhaps over East Anglia, but particularly over the Midlands, southern England and parts of Wales come the afternoon and into the evening. Still quite warm here. Cool on some of these North Sea coasts where it stays grey. A very pleasant day in western Scotland once more. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place for the thunderstorms. Not everywhere in this area will catch a downpour, but where they do occur, they could cause some problems, potential for flooding, certainly a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. And we're not done with the thunderstorms because on Saturday across the south, we could again see some very heavy downpours developing. Once more, a fine day in western Scotland.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth. Available at gbnews.com.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubry, standing in for the big man. Now, a new report from an independent think tank has suggested that Labour should scrap the 35 hours job seekers rule brought in by the Tory-led government in 2013, and it states that jobless benefit claimants should spend 35 hours a week looking for work. Now, the Institute for Employment Studies has said that it is a bad policy that should instead be replaced by unemployed individuals on benefits being asked to complete 3 job hunting activities each week instead. But with more than 10 million Brits out of working age out of work, the debate over how best to get Britain working again has never been more important. So, should the government change the requirements, or is this an example of Labour once again having a soft-touch approach to welfare? Still joined, of course, by my excellent panel, Dame Andrea Jenkins, former Conservative MP and Minister, and the human rights campaigner and activist Peter Tatchell. I'll start with you this time, Dame Andrea. We've had a terrible problem, irrespective of government.
Yes, I agree.
With long-term unemployment, particularly now the rise of mental health, people on disability benefits, on the old never, never. How do we break that cycle? 35 hours a week, surfing the web, doing nothing measurable is one thing. Does this new system of proving you've done 3 things have any merit, or actually do we need to be a lot tougher?
Well, first of all, the figures have come down since 2010. I recall, I think it was 7.79% unemployed, and it's gone down to about, 4.1, 4.2 now. So we're in a better place than how Labour left it. But I think, like you said, Martin, it's about being tougher. I mean, never mind surfing the net and trying to prove you've been looking for jobs. Get people out in the community doing some work, and they just get their benefits for that. Then they'll soon want a job, won't they? I would get people out doing voluntary work.
But you're in government for 14 years. You could have done that.
Well, I wasn't in that role. If I'd have been in that role, I would have pushed that, Martin.
Yeah. Peter, what do you reckon? This idea of ticking boxes, filling out forms, is it the answer? We have a terrible problem. We've got 875,000 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in employment, education or training. They're listless. They've got no route forward. They're trapped in this benefits cycle. How do we break that?
Well, we do need to break it, definitely, no doubt about that. But the problem is that there are parts of the country where the jobs just aren't there. So that's a really big problem. We also need to incentivise work. We need to raise the national minimum wage, because right now, for some people, to get a job, a low-paid job, makes them only marginally better off than being on benefits. That's not an incentive, it's a disincentive.
I agree with that.
Give them the incentive to get a job. And also, I think we just need to say to people, look, if you get a job, we will also find other ways to support you. So it's all about more encouragement, but also governments and business need to get together to create the jobs so the jobs are there for people to go for.
But I've got a concern. We've seen how actually Labour are punishing those who do the right thing. We've seen it with pensioners, we've seen it with those who want to send their children to private schools, and we've seen it with the wealth creators. So if Labour are driving out these wealth creators to leave Britain, how are they going to create the jobs? So I think it's going to get worse under Labour, unfortunately, Martin.
Is the big problem sick note Britain?
Yes.
You hear all these stats now about people who are on mental health, a huge boom in people claiming to have mental health. Many of them may have that, but is it the new bad back? Have we got a problem of people getting on the never, never, and they just simply never get instructed or told or forced to leave that cycle.
I agree. It shouldn't be a way of life, the benefits culture. It should be a safety net. And so we've got to be radical with this. Unfortunately, I don't think Labour will. We wasn't radical enough to get these people back to work. Because let's face it, I'm sure you agree, Peter, if people are back to work, it raises their self-esteem and their mental health is much better.
Yeah. I'll just point out this is not a Labour proposal. It's from the Institute for Employment Studies.
But Labour are looking at it.
Labour are looking at it.
Yeah.
And I do think it's worth looking at. I do think that people should be required to provide some kind of proof or evidence that they're actually doing something to get work. And if they live in an employment black spot where there are no jobs, that needs to be noted and assessed, and the government needs to invest there with business in joint enterprise to create those jobs so that everybody in every part of Britain has a chance to get a decent, well-paid job.
And also in schools, actually start teaching the entrepreneurship to get people setting their own business up.
And a lot more also work with new apprenticeships and apprenticeship schemes.
I mean,
they're massively underfunded.
No, but we've had more apprenticeships now under the Conservative government than ever before. We hugely invest in that. I mean, I was the apprenticeship minister and I'm quite proud of what the government did in that. But again, we've got to break this benefits culture.
And if we don't, we have a massive bill. Workshire Britain currently reports out yesterday £16 billion every year. That's £9 billion in benefits and £7 billion in lost taxation. So we need to get on with that sharpish. Thank you to my panel. Excellent stuff. Now, coming up after the break, European car makers are calling for an urgent action amidst a sharp decline in electric vehicle demand. Now, what does this have to say about the current appetite for net zero? They're trying to force cars on us. Doesn't seem that anybody wants. This is Farage with me, Martin Daubney, only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
70% of population will make a judgment on someone just by looking at them. And within 2-3 seconds, we make a decision if we like someone or not.
Really? Is it that quick?
So it's actually very, very fast. So before we have a chance to kind of express what we want to say, our subconscious mind is kind of looking for clues. So you look at someone and you look at their, for example, I don't know, the watch they're wearing, maybe the makeup. I spent literally my whole childhood learning, being absolutely mesmerized by my mom's ability to choose different style of clothing for different style personalities. British definitely take a pride in their appearance. They do spend time to look good. There is a lot of amazing British designers. For me, it was always about that feeling that I've learned from my mom's shop, how the people were living, buying certain things. And I was like, oh my God, they look happy. They've got this big smile on their face. My main objective always was to make people feel good. So now as a stylist, I help them to go through style therapy. I help them to discover colours that are good for their colours that they wear them close to their face, but also it sets the tone for their wardrobe. And then we look at the outfit formula. So it's, yeah. When I look at Ellie's dress sense, I was just thinking, OK, she likes to be polished.
I do like to be polished.
Exactly. Elegant. Timeless. I look at the reference to the dress you're wearing today. It's that kind of Chanel black and white, timeless, never go out of fashion. So for me, it's about, it's not the trends, but how you would like your personal style to be and how timeless it can be.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday, we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubry, standing in for Nigel Farage tonight. Now, Germany has seen a sharp and spectacular 70% drop in electric car sales, sending shockwaves through the European Union's largest auto market and also raising alarms across the entire European bloc. In August, electric vehicle sales plunged not only in Germany but also across the entire EU, with a 44% drop overall. Now, the Electric Automobile Manufacturers Association is calling for urgent action, warning that the EV market is in freefall as new EU carbon reduction targets, of course, loom. The manufacturers now face the risk of multi-billion euro fines for non-compliance, and pressure is mounting to delay the ambitious 2035 ban on petrol cars. It's not just the EU market that is in trouble, because last month the UK car industry indicated that it would miss government targets due to a cooling of consumer demand for electric vehicles. What's driving this downturn? To discuss this, I'm joined, delighted to say, by Donegal McCarthy, the director at the Climate Media Coalition, and of course my wonderful panel, Dame Andrea Jenkins, former Tory MP and Minister, and the human rights campaigner and activist Peter Tatchell. Donegal, welcome to the studio. Let's start with you. People don't want these cars. They're choosing not to buy them. They're unreliable. They're expensive. People are concerned about the range on them. The figures tell us that. They've tried the carrot. Now they're trying the stick. Either way, the EV industry is simply running out of charge.
Actually, it's the opposite. In the United Kingdom last year, in August, we had 25% sales for EVs, a record, 10% up on last year. What you talked about is just, it's actually nonsense. Hang on a second.
That was fleet vehicles, not private.
No, total vehicle sales were up 25% of the market. Now, talk about charge. Range anxiety. Yes, range anxiety used to be a thing. The modern cars now in the market are between 250 to 450 miles. That is more than the average car driver drives in a whole week. So the idea that range is that cars, EVs are now better, and it's not just me as an environmentalist saying it. The Automobile Association says very clearly, EV cars are cheaper to run, they're cleaner and they're more fun to drive. Why are they cheaper to run? Because over their lifetime, the cost of running them, of maintenance and fueling them, is significantly lower than fossil fuels. So the challenge is bringing second-hand car sales down to the same price as EVs, and then the market will take off.
You paint a picture of Nirvana, where unicorns jump around and everyone lives in bliss. The figures don't support that whatsoever. 43.9 decline in electric vehicle sales year on year in Britain, 14.4% of the market share versus 21% just 1 year ago. Those who've got them, who want them, have already got them. And now they're punishing manufacturers who can't even shift them on the forecourt. It's going to be £15,000, Donegal, £15,000 per vehicle if they don't meet their targets. It's going to bankrupt the industry.
No, it's not. The European manufacturers have said every year, almost since 1990, you're going to bankrupt us, dilute the regulations. The European Union usually dilutes a little bit, and then they put in the regulations, and every year for the last 3 decades, the European manufacturers have actually managed to deliver cleaner cars than as according to EU regulations. Look, let's look at the wider context. We're living in a world today where right across the world today, as you know, Martin, we're looking at floods in Africa, in Europe and in Asia.
Well, my car won't do anything about that.
And of the European emissions, 25% of European emissions, carbon pollution, come from surface transport. We have to tackle it if we're going to have a hope of protecting Britain and the wider world from climate breakdown.
OK, let's move to my panel now. Dame Andrea Jenkins, I could almost hear you gnashing your teeth in the background there. What's your take on this? The data seems to indicate that consumers are voting with their wallets and just not choosing them.
Especially domestic. Absolutely. You made a good point, Martin, saying about fleet, but they're incentivised, aren't they, to get electric vehicles. And electric cars are just far too expensive. People can't afford it, especially, as you said, on the second-hand market. Now, I think that the climate zealots are actually bringing the car industries to its knees, and we should leave it to the markets. And I think when the public are struggling to pay their energy bills, they're not going to buy an electric car. So I think it's time that, you know, these climate change proponents lived in the real world.
Peter, what's your take on it?
Well, clearly the cost of living crisis has had an impact.
Absolutely.
That's one of the reasons why people are not going electric. Also, there's a misunderstanding about the long-term costs and benefits. I mean, my friend, I don't know if he's accurate, but he said to charge his car fully, it costs less than £1, whereas if he was going to buy petrol, it'd be £50. So clearly, they're much cheaper to run, even though the costs are much higher initially. And maybe the way forward is to bring down those initial costs to give people a greater incentive.
Is the way to tackle this to fine manufacturers 15 grand per car, and all the incentives from before, like no congestion zone, no ULEZ, that's all going because there's a 12 billion quid hole in the revenue from petrol sales. So they'll always find new ways to tax you, even if you do the right thing.
Well, there's no doubt that the manufacturers are under pressure, and rightly so, because if we don't tackle this climate crisis, we're going to pay, in the long term, far, far greater costs. It's going to fall on the taxpayer.
Or we'll buy Chinese cars that don't comply with any of these rules, and in the meantime decimate the European manufacturing
What's
industry.
very interesting about government UK Tory policy, which is being implemented at the moment by the current administration, is that car prices are coming down. And actually that's really exciting because it's actually making second-hand EVs accessible to the vast majority of British drivers who buy second-hand cars. 79% of the market is second-hand car rates. Once we crack that, which the government seems to be doing right now, we actually have exponential growth. And that means poorer people will have cheaper driving, and that's good for the driver, it's good for poorer drivers, it's good for the environment.
OK, well, superb stuff. And let's have a quick chat now, of course, with Jacob Rees-Mogg, because the State of the Nation is up next. Jacob Rees-Mogg is joining us now. Jacob, what's on your menu?
Well, one of the things I'm going to be talking about is on a new book by Vernon Bogdanor, the great constitutional historian, on 6 figures who've made the political weather, one of whom is our very own Nigel Farage. And I'm going to be talking to Vernon about whether Nigel could ultimately end up as Prime Minister. So something I think GB News viewers will be absolutely fascinated by. Another thing we're going to discuss is the IEA report suggesting that we need total reform of the NHS, not just pouring more money in, but fundamental reform so that we make it look like the health service that other countries have, that are more responsive to patients and less run for the sake of the producer.
And Jacob, if Nigel were Prime Minister, that surely would mean that you'd join reform at long last.
Well, I think if Nigel were to become Prime Minister, he'd probably want to become a Tory first of all. But perhaps we'll have to ask him that when he's back in the studio to get his view on whether or not he can become Prime Minister and whether he'd do it as a Tory.
Spoken like a true politician there. Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, straight after this State of the Nation. Thank you very much to my superstar panel tonight. Peter Tatchell, Dame Andrea Jenkins, and of course, Donica. Always a pleasure. I still don't think it's going to catch on, this electric vehicle thing. I really don't. I know we can carry this.
We can put a tenner on it.
We'll carry this one on in the pub. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. I hope I did a good job. Nigel will be back next week. I'm back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m. If you haven't had enough of my nonsense, you'll catch more of it then. Thanks for your company. Enjoy the show. Jacob Rees-Mogg is next. But first, here's your weather with Alex Deakin. Have a good one.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Good evening to you. Tomorrow, likely to start fairly grey. It should brighten up with some sunshine, but a change in the south. We are expecting to see some heavy and thundery showers developing as the day goes on. Low pressure is just pushing northwards, getting rid of the high pressure that's brought most of us a dry week. With the easterly winds, the cloud is feeding back in through the night across northern England, across the Midlands, into East Wales and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, generally staying dry and clear here, and that's where we'll see the lowest temperatures well down into single figures. But elsewhere, staying quite mild, actually, with the blanket of cloud. That cloud thick enough for a bit of drizzle on some eastern coasts and over the Pennines. We may see 1 or 2 showers in the morning across the southeast, but we're more likely to see them develop as we go through the day. It will be quite a cloudy start, but as those skies start to brighten, some heavier showers developing later on. Much of western Wales, Northern Ireland and western Scotland having a sparkling start to the day with plenty of sunshine. That will soon start to lift the temperatures, but the east coast plagued by that har, and that could be a feature of the weather throughout the day. And at times that cloud thick enough for a bit of drizzle. As I mentioned, though, it's in the south where we're a bit concerned about the showers that are likely to develop. It will brighten up. We'll see some sunshine, but that will spark a scattering of showers, perhaps over East Anglia, but particularly over the Midlands, southern England and parts of Wales come the afternoon and into the evening. Still quite warm here, cool on some of these North Sea coasts where it stays grey. A very pleasant day in western Scotland once more. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place for the thunderstorms. Not everywhere in this area will catch a downpour, but where they do occur, they could cause some problems, potential for flooding, certainly a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. And we're not done with the thunderstorms because on Saturday across the south, we could again see some very heavy downpours developing. Once more, a fine day in western Scotland.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to...
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Is it time to abolish the National Health Service?